From humble beginnings to the pinnacle of success, one man's journey proves that with determination, anything is possible. This is Catch as Catch Can with George Tinsley Sr., inspiring conversations of triumph over adversity. Here's George.
My guest today is Steve Giordano, the president and CEO of the Boys and Girls Club of Polk County. With decades of experience leading corporate turnarounds, Steve has applied his business expertise to the nonprofit world, helping the club expand their reach, renovate key facilities, deepen their impact on thousands of children and families across Polk County. Steve has come into the area and has done a great job, well respected by those who have met him and watched him in his leadership role at the Boys and Girls Club. Steve, welcome to the show.
George, it's an honor to be with you.
Well, it's my pleasure, sir. And as always, each time we have an opportunity to get together, I leave with a heart full of joy of all the different things that you're doing in the community, and proud to be associated with you and the club. I want to let's just start off and talk about your career. You spent decades leading corporate turnarounds before moving into the nonprofit leadership. While skills you transferred most naturally, and what you need to learn from scratch. How were you able to pull that all together in stepping into the leadership of the Boys Club?
Well, George, ignorance is a wonderful master, and as long as you don't know what you're doing, and you don't know what you can be in trouble for, you kind of just bump into things until you learn them. I innately felt that the for-profit world was the same as the not-for-profit world. It just seemed like, you're balancing resources, whether they be human or capital resources. It just seemed very similar to me. These things, as you know, because you run a lot of businesses, comes down to people. It's mostly just about people. But I did find some differences there. I think the two distinct changes that I had to adjust to were, the first one is I didn't have to seek out my customer. My customers are the families who need our services, who can't always afford them, whose kids need mentors, whose kids need guidance and some nutrition and exercise and help with homework. So those customers just appear to us. And in my for-profit world, that's not the case. The second thing that I think is a big difference is in this world, now that I've been working in the last 6 years, unlike my previous experiences, there's just an absence of hypocrisy. I don't see a single hypocrite, George, not in the donors, not in the board of which you are a proud member. At least we're proud to have you, not in the staff, not in the volunteers. Everybody who comes in contact with our kids is doing it for the right reasons. There's just no hypocrisy. And as you might imagine, I saw a fair amount of that in the for-profit world.
Right. What drew you actually to the Boys and Girls Club of Polk County?
Yeah, this is embarrassing to admit, George, but I came for the wrong reason, but I'm staying for the right reason. My wife and Kay and I always talked about doing one of these turnarounds that I've been doing for the last 30 years in Florida, where we've had a home for about the last 30 years. And I've told her, I don't make these decisions. Only troubled companies call me, and nobody in Florida, IBM's not calling me. They're fine. So it really is just an opportunity. And of course, she traveled with me in some cases to Richmond and upstate New York and LA and Atlanta, lots of different places. And, we just prayed about it. We just prayed that there would be, when our first grandchild was born, that there would be an opportunity in Florida. And shortly after we got with our pastor and made that plea, and I think it was like the Tuesday after the Sunday, George, we got a call. I got a call from a headhunter and said, have you ever been in the nonprofit space? And I said, no, I have not. And she said, have you ever been on a nonprofit board? I said, no. And so, well, your resume seems like you're a turnaround guy and you do mergers and acquisitions, and there's an acquisition in a nonprofit in Polk County, Florida. I said, oh, well, I'm very interested. And she said, well, no, you're not going to get it. You need experience doing those things. So we're not going to take you, but your resume looks good for a variety of reasons. We just put it in front of the board. And I said, no, this is the answered prayer. This is the one I'm going to get. And as fate would have it, the board agreed to, after interviewing me several times. I think there were 6 interviews, and I'm sure there were other people in the mix, but I was lucky enough to be selected. But then
Yeah.
something happened after the first years of, a couple of years of encountering really difficult cash flow challenges and liquidity issues, and building an organization and merging an organization that didn't necessarily want to be merged. And that is, it came as a result of advice that I got from a former board member named Wogie Badcock, who said, "Steve, when you're having a tough day, go inside the club, watch the kids." And I did. And
Uh-huh.
it's transformative, as you know, because you spend a great deal of time with our youth. And I say to the staff now, I came for the wrong reasons to help this organization stabilize and build, but I'm staying for the right reasons because if I can leave this legacy behind and take my grandchildren past these beautiful buildings we built and say, Pop had something to do with that, and if I've had anything to do with the hope trajectory of these kids, man, that is the best job I've ever had.
Yeah. Steve, that's a good overview there. I remember when I had an opportunity to speak with you, not necessarily an interview, but I was one of the guys that was selected to speak with you. I was thoroughly impressed with your, with our conversation and your reasons for coming into the area. So I'm glad you and your family, which is even better, made the choice to come into the area. Once you got there, see, what was the most surprising thing that you encountered?
So, yes, George, there were many surprises. The first one was, and this is not an exaggeration. One of the clubs that we were merging with was, what we'll call in the zone of insolvency. The credit cards had been taken away from the staff. There was debt, over $250,000 in debt, and I kind of understood that. What I didn't understand is that we were about 10 days, 7 days, between 7 and 10 days away from our next payroll. And in our 7 bank accounts, we didn't have enough money to make payroll. And I remember a particular board member saying to me, "Yeah, well, you got to figure something out." And I'm glad I'm not in your shoes. And frankly, I don't know how you sleep at night. And if you're used to troubled situations, I replied back to him. I remember, well, it's fine. I sleep like a baby. And he said, "That's great." I said, "No, no. I mean, I wake up every hour and cry because 7 days away from payroll and no money, and, I didn't realize that, as troubled as companies can be, you can normally count on revenue. When you're running a 501(c)(3) that depends on a generous community, and there's few more generous than Polk County, you have to realize that you're always gotta be out there asking for the kids and giving people reasons and outcomes to give, and so that was the biggest surprise, that we had to get on our resource development game rather quickly, and we did. And, our friends at Citizens Bank and Trust gave us a line of credit, and that helped tremendously. We applied for some grants, and that helped us. And today, thank God, we're in a much different place.
Good, good. You said that the club provides more than after school care. How do you explain the full scope of services to someone who only thinks of it as a child care place facility?
Yeah, I think you touch on something really important, because we are a misunderstood organization. People think that we're doing babysitting, and I like to start with the outcomes. And when because if we're investing in something, there ought to be a return on that investment, and the community gets a great return when a Boys and Girls Club opens. Before I tell you what they do, I'll tell you what it creates. So when we come to town, crime is going down in that area by 30%. High school graduation is going to improve by 10 to 15%. Teen pregnancy is going to go down by 35%. Smoking will go down by 85%. And now food insecurity improves because we serve over 50,000 meals per month. So those are the outcomes that happen. And what drives those outcomes are some excited kids who come in, and remember now, and you know this better than most, both with how you grew up and what you've experienced mentoring young kids. But these kids are coming initially because they don't have a choice. Usually mom or grandmom is a single situation at home, going to drop them off so that they can work and so they'll have after school care. But when they drop them off, they're gonna go in in different groups. One group is gonna go do some homework, and we actually have real teachers that'll come from the schools next door and take care of the homework with the kids. And if they don't have homework or pretend not to have homework, they're gonna work with that teacher on their worst subject. The next group might be outside doing triple play, where they're playing kickball or softball, and there may be another group inside the game room where they're playing carpet ball or maybe on one of the video screens. And then there's a bunch of kids outside on the porch who are getting a hot meal, and we keep rotating them through these activities. And then maybe there's a common sense group where there's a torch club where they're learning some skills about how to be business people or how to manage a checkbook and do those things. All of these things are happening, but I think it's best summarized by a single mom who encountered me when I came out of one of our Lakeland clubs. And she said, I was new to this area. I'm a single mom. My daughter and I would fight every day after school to get the homework done, and we'd fight over dinner. And then, after she'd go to bed mad, I'd go to bed. Now I come pick her up at the club. Her homework is done. She's fed. She's in a good mood from all the exercise. What you've given me is a relationship with my daughter. That's really the
Well,
best definition of the product we have.
yeah, that's outstanding. That's outstanding. What role does the club play in addressing issues like teen pregnancy, graduation rates, and company health? And you touched on a few of these things.
Yeah, so we have organizations that will come in and speak to our kids about about what can happen if certain precautions aren't taken, and they circulate in all of our 9 clubs now. And what we have more than that, I think, is a mentor and a series of mentors that they believe in. There's a story I've told from time to time that I think underscores the need and the reliance on these mentors. Because you could say to kids, listen, don't get in trouble or use protection or do your homework. And if you're a parent, they're not going to listen. And if you're a stranger, they're going to listen. But if you've earned the right through mentorship to make these suggestions and take the kids aside and have these serious conversations with them, um, then it's going to penetrate. And here's how I think you earn the right. I'm just going to give you one, and I could give you dozens, George, as you know, stories of of a kid who was in a club. It was again our Muso club this time, and these two 7-year-olds are fighting, and they're not fighting easily. They are swinging haymakers at each other. And the unit director, Ivory, at the time, she's still with us, but she's no longer a unit director. She's over training. But Ivory steps out of her office where I am and she separates the kids. One of them wants no part, goes away. The other one is still angry and ready to fight. She brings that one into the office where I'm pretending to not be listening and I'm on my laptop. And she says to him, Sweetie, what is wrong with you today? Because he's just so mad. She can just see it. And he says, I hate him and I hate it here. And she says, okay, sweetie, but what's wrong? He said, I told you I hate it here and I hate you, Miss Ivory. And then George, she does instinctively, and I don't know what instinctively means, but instinctively she gets down to his level again and she says to him, sweetie, what's wrong? And he says, last night we had to move out of our home because my dad lost his job and we got to move in with my aunt and she's mean and I'm scared. And she hugs him.
Well, mhm.
Now that hug is not gonna fix it, as you know, George. This little guy is still gonna have to go through some really tough things, but you're not gonna tell me that this person who she trusts, hugging him, telling him it's gonna be a little bit better, is not gonna make a difference. It is. It's gonna earn her mentorship, and you're also not gonna tell me somebody as successful as you, and I know your story, and I repeat your story, that you have gotten this far without a mentor. You have. I have, we
That's
all
correct.
have. And so if
Yep.
these guys can earn their way into mentorship, which they do every day, then they've got an open to listen among the children. And I think that's how they get through. And that's how they want to come back with the A on the report card to show these people who they trust who are their mentors.
That's awesome. That's an awesome story, and certainly one that could be transferred into some of our school systems that to do the same sort of thing. Thanks for sharing that with us, Steve. You oversee Polk County is one of the biggest counties in the entire state of Florida, and you oversee multiple facilities. How do you ensure that the equity of the resources and attention across the states take place?
We have a phenomenal staff, and John Lane and Curtis Riddick, and between the two of them, they not only ensure that we have consistent programs, but they manage a budget so wisely that it manages to lift all boats. When we first merged, we had both sides were concerned about where the resources would go. I didn't know this, and you've been here a lot longer than me. Probably you do know this, that Winter Haven and Lakeland don't always get along. And so, the people who right? And we were gonna merge, and Winter Haven was saying, "Well, we don't want you merging with Lakeland because then they'll get our resources." And, Lakeland was saying, "Well, we don't want Winter Haven to get our resources." And we're like, "Well, first of all, there's no resources to be gotten." But, now here we are 6 years later, and, Winter Haven, who was so concerned about Lakeland getting their resources, we just built a $4 million beautiful facility there. And Lakeland, we, renovated all of our MUSO unit, and we're building a new workforce readiness center in Mulberry, and it lifts all boats. And so, our fear of scarcity is met with the Lord's answer of abundance. It lifts all boats.
Yeah, yeah. So when you're choosing leaders for these facilities, how complicated is that?
Again, I know you're asking these questions because you're running a podcast, because you know the answers to all of them, because you and I have talked about it before. And the selection of talent is the most important thing we can do for these kids, because if we screw up, now we put them in what we're calling a safe space with people who can't be trusted. And you and I have both encountered people who, on paper, they look right. And, they've got the right degrees from the right places. And, it just, but when it comes to integrity, you couldn't trust them any further than you could throw a soggy mattress up a spiral staircase, and that's not real far. And so I look for integrity. I look for consistency, and, that there's success. Listen, you didn't become a success overnight, but once you did, you had a trail of success. There were lots of places I could have looked for that showed how successful you were. And so if somebody is considering somebody as elite as yourself, all they have to do is look at your history and say, were they able to create value? Were they able to add value? And you have done that consistently through your life. And so that is a pretty good predictor for the future. And so I like that. But foremost, I look for somebody who has a belly laugh and doesn't take themselves too seriously, because, I have a no jerk rule, George. And that is, I've done my time with the jerks, but I've gotten to the point in my life where I'm not working with jerks anymore.
Right.
And so I want people who love life, who want to make a difference, who consider service an important thing, and who, like me, just abhor a bully. And if you don't
Right.
like a bully, come on and help our kids avoid them.
Yeah. Well, Steve, one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on our podcast is I want to highlight you and what you've done in the community with the Boys and Girls Club. So even though you and I have spoken and I know some of these things, I want our listeners to hear what you've done and how you've accomplished this. So pardon some of the questions. I've got a loaded one here that I think we'll all be interested to understand your goals. Renovation and capital projects, which I know have been dear to you here lately. How do you decide which facilities get renovated are built first? That's one part of the question. Partnerships with funders like Publix, the Barnett family, and the Florida Community Loan Fund have been critical. What makes the partnership successful in your eyes? And what has been the community's response to these reimage clubs?
Yeah. So thank you, George. And I'm going to take them not necessarily in order, but one at a time. Uh, First and foremost, we are the community. Um, This is, when I go out and spend a dollar, whether it is, in a conference that I have to go to Atlanta and I have to stay in a hotel, I'm thinking, Publix, United Way, Sheriff's Department, George Tinsley paid for this visit. There better be some value, and I better save some money, and I better make sure I'm doing right because as I say to people who say, "Well, Steve, it'd be nice if we could do this," I would say, "It is nice, and if it were my money, I'd get to make that decision. But it's not my money; it's the community's money. Everything we do is from the community, which is extraordinarily generous. And the people and the institutions that you mentioned, and we could mention more, and I don't want to because I don't want to leave anybody out. Um,
Right.
we live because of them. But starting with the goals, I didn't know what the goal should be. It just seemed like, well, here we have some outcomes. And when we show up, these outcomes happen. So it would seem that spreading these to more areas makes more sense. And we don't have enough clubs. We're serving about a little less than 1,000 kids a year. And I had an opportunity to meet with Sheriff Grady Judd. And I said, Sheriff, there's 55,000 at risk kids in Polk County. What number do you think I have to reach critical mass whereby if we put them through our program and he knows he's a former club kid, that it
Right.
would have an impact, that it would reach critical mass. And he said, I think 10,000 kids a year. If you were able to serve 10,000 kids a year every year, I think that over time that would have a generational impact on the outcomes in our community. And since the community is paying for it, I think that's the best chance you have of getting a return. And so we just targeted 10,000 kids 5 or 6 years ago, and we just finished our fifth year on that program. We've reached 5,000 kids, and that gives an average daily attendance of 1,000, and 5,000 who are members every single year last year. And so we're right on track with the next 5 years. The board has asked me to do another 5 years, and I have agreed. And so we'll get to 10,000 kids in 5 years. And the last thing is you ask, how do we, decide where to go and how do we make sure that we get our donors feeling good about these investments? We do involve them. When we first went on this capital campaign, I asked who would be the best chairperson for this, and I said, "Well, the Barnetts, Ashley and Wesley would be the best." And they said, "Well, that's great, Steve. Who's your second choice? Because you're not getting the Barnetts." And I remember, just like when I wanted you for our board, I said, I don't have a second choice. I want this person. I want the best. I want the stars. And so I went to Wesley and I asked him, and he said, "Boy, I wish I could, but I can't." And so I asked him again, and he said, "I wish I could, but I can't." And finally he said, "Enough already. I'll be your chair." And and when Wesley Barnett and Ashley Barnett are your chairs, it's more than just the influence they have. It's the wisdom they bring and the humility they bring to this, and the notion that you better spend it right, and let's talk about where this money goes. And it's easier to decide where you go because we own a couple of facilities. We own a nice piece of property close to you in Winter Haven, and it's a lakefront property, probably worth a lot more than we're willing to consider. Um, but if we own it, we consider upgrading it because when we got here, we had facilities, George, that didn't have air conditioning. Our buses didn't have air conditioning. Our kids, we thought, deserved better. And so we said, all right, I like to expand without raising my fixed costs. It drives me crazy to raise our fixed costs. So I want to expand in as many public places as I can, which is why we're in community places in Lake Wales and in Fort Meade and in Bartow, and we have a wonderful relationship with Fred Hyde and the school board, and so we lease buses from them and we got space from them. But then on those places where we own the dirt, like at our Muso Club in Lakeland, and we had a parcel of land behind our corporate office in Mulberry, and of course the Winter Haven facility. Well, let's raise money to totally redo these so that we can improve our assets and have a better place for our kids. And that's how we chose. And the last part is since we involve these donors in the front, we have to make sure that we include them in the back end and say, here's what your dollars do. Look at this beautiful facility in Winter Haven. Look at this beautiful gym in Lakeland. Look at this beautiful workforce development center we're building in Mulberry. But for your generosity, this doesn't happen. And by sharing that with them and keeping in front of them and thanking them, I've learned in nonprofits, they say some people don't want recognition. And I believe that. I believe more want it
Right.
than admit to it, but I believe some people really don't want recognition, but everybody wants gratitude, and everybody wants to know that what they spent money on is going somewhere, and I think that's really important for us to do, and I think we do an okay job of it.
Great response there. Yeah. Yes. So on an ongoing basis, how often do you pull your staff together from each one of your systems to continue that goal and of carrying these clubs to the next level and growing your attendance?
Well, we have metrics that, frankly, 501(c)(3)s don't always have. That is another change, to your earlier question, because I'll just say that, we're guided by values. So you don't have I can't touch we have 130 employees and I can't get to all of them all the time. But I want a culture that kinda feeds into the same values that I have. And so early
Right.
on, we established these values and we said, all right, somebody comes and says, hey, Steve, I want to do something. And I say, okay, well, is it safe for the kids? Well, I don't know. Not interested. If it's not safe for the kids, it's our fairest value. We've got to be safe for the kids. All right. Yeah, Steve, it's safe for the kids. Well, my second question is, does it drive revenue? We'll say, "No, Steve, it doesn't drive revenue, but it still gets not interested." "What do you mean you're not interested?" I mean, it's not all about money. Well, there is no mission without money. Make no mistake. So if it's not safe for the kids, doesn't drive revenue, we're not doing it. So, okay, Steve, it's safe for the kids, it drives revenue. Great. Does it improve their experience? Does it make them more likely to come back? Because I got to grow the numbers. Yes, Steve, it improves it. Great. And so if it improves their experience and it's going to lead to growth, good, it does. And can we do it in accordance with the integrity commitment we make to our stakeholders? Because if it's without integrity, we're not gonna do it. And as long as it conforms to those values, which we call Regis, resources, experience, growth, integrity, and safety, if it's Regis, you don't even have to ask me. Just do it. I'll pay for it. And so that helps. And then we hold our leaders accountable. I require John, our director, our vice president of operations, have a double-digit increase in average daily attendance every year. And he's got to have an optimal club experience of at least 66%. That is, 66% of the kids have to say, there is no better experience that I can rate you than be in our club. And we've been down in the 40s when we first started this. And I'm proud to say we've grown every year with 66% now. So it's with metrics, it's with me getting in front of them. I have a lot of passion for what I do, and I think that's contagious sometimes. But I don't get to see our people enough, which is why I'm lucky to have tremendous leaders like John Lane and Ashley Ray, who manage the day-to-day business for us.
Yeah. Well, I would say your leadership is very contagious. So that as much as you're able to get around, that certainly will take them to the next level. Um, as far as your personal family situation, as you've moved into the area, tell us a little bit about your how, as a father, your personal experiences as a parent influences your leadership.
I think it really does, and this is probably not politic to say, but, as I'm giving advice to these young leaders, who I think are enduring the same journey I did, we all start out in leadership with some level of insecurity and lack of knowledge about what to do, and, leaders, great ones at least, are very, very rare. I mean, you've probably met in your life thousands and thousands of people who are called manager or leader, but the great ones, man, I've only met maybe 10 out of the hundreds I've met, 10 great leaders, and I've met Jack Welch and you, and, so yeah, and I do. I do consider you a great leader because when you look at people as a resource to be, a tool to be used, there's a lack of connection. But if you see them as part of your family, it's easier, and I really do. And that's why it's so disappointing when one comes up short. You feel like a dad who didn't do a good job. And I'm old enough now so that I do look at them as my kids, and that's what I don't think is politic to say. But obviously, there are boundaries and that one doesn't cross. That one, has familiarity with their family, and so we're always appropriate. But I care about them, and I care about their families in a way that I care about my kids and my grandkids, and I can't help myself. I walk into a club and a little guy has got his shoelaces untied. I'm tying them because that's just what granddads do. And so I think it influences me a lot. I come from a place where my family is very, very important to me. My wife Kay and I have been married for many years, and she knows what's in my heart, and she knows how much passion I bring to work, and she puts up with me coming home late and maybe spending too much time on the weekend doing things. And she always offers support, and she's always likes Rita, just a person who I can always count on to be my cheerleader. And if God forbid somebody at work is or a board member is done something towards me that she doesn't think is right, they're going to hear about it. You do
Yeah.
not want Kay on your bed, just like I don't want Rita on my bedside.
Right. So tell us a little bit about your early background. I know you're a big sports guy, and we talk sometimes about some of the early other early sports figures. Tell us a little bit about that
Yeah. So
growing up.
by the way, just as an aside, when I found out that you were in Polk County, and I came to you that first day, you were wearing a Tins cap, and approached you, and said I was a big fan of the ABA where you had played, um, and I said that I liked the Nets, and I don't want to say that you didn't believe me, but you kind of said, "Oh, really? Well, who was playing that?" And I said, "Well, it was John Williamson was there, and of course Kevin Dockery was the coach, and Dr. J was and the Whopper, they had really Billy Pultz, and I memorized it because I have a pretty good memory and I love sports, as you know. And it just comes from years of watching athletes like yourself and just finding, um, I don't know, virtues that I didn't have in the way Johnny Unitas would corral a team. And I have a picture of Johnny in my office, where he's in those black high tops, in his old
Yeah.
uniform, just leading a team, just this, little guy. And I always found heroes in sports figures. And I played football myself. I went to college on a football scholarship. I was a linebacker back in the high top leather helmet days. Um, not, not quite that far, but while I was in college, I saw an ad for a warehouseman in a furniture store, and I went inside there, and they said, "Well, we don't have a furniture warehouse job for you, but we do have a janitor's job for you." And I said, "I'll take it." And they said, "Well, it's nighttime janitor." I said, "I'll still take it." They said, "Well, this kid's good. He's just not ready for the show. We got to put him at nights first as a janitor." And I just learned, mostly because of fear of failure, that if you work hard, people notice. And I worked really hard, and I did become a warehouse person. First, I became a day janitor, and then I became a warehouse person. And this was all while I was going to college. And 17 years later, I left that company as their vice president of operations. And
Outstanding.
and if you have taken every job from janitor to vice president of operations, you've learned to solve a lot of problems. And
Right.
so if you've learned to solve a lot of problems, then when you leave, and I did 17 years later, my first job was a president of another company because they had troubles and they wanted to turn it around. And that's where I went. But sports has always been so important to me because, I just find that if you slip into business speak, of which I don't have any skill for doing, you wind up doing a lot of activities that don't score. Like they're fancy plays. You got a double reverse and a triple reverse, a long meeting where everybody sits and drinks coffee and talks about things. And they say, "Well, that was a really good meeting. Oh, what a terrific meeting. Great meeting. Great meeting." I've never been to a good meeting my whole life. I'm young. It could still happen, but meetings are terrible.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
happens
Yeah.
is, when you're in a restaurant, George, or when I'm in a club, or when I used to be in warehouses, or when I used to be in showrooms, and you're actually talking to real people who have real jobs, and when I used to ride along with truck drivers, and talk with them, because I used to be a truck driver, and they can tell you somebody who's authentic, a mile away. And so
Right.
when you spend time with these people and you realize that regardless of the position they have, they're just like us. They're trying to take care of their families. And I just think that sports lets you separate the niceties of going through the motion with score. Nobody cares how good the play was. Nobody cares what a great athlete you are. Nobody cares. Did you win? Did you produce something? And that's what I'm here to do. You can say that I'm doing a good job or a bad job. I don't think we'll know till I'm done. And when I'm done, let somebody else talk about it, because I'm so focused on the game right now and scoring. And I know that I do lots of good stuff in a day. But did we get anywhere? Did it score? Did it get us some revenue? Did it get us further? Did it get us more kids? If it doesn't do that, then I'm just not on it. And that discipline comes from my love of sports.
Yeah. Yeah, that linebacker mentality certainly it bleeds through, and I can hear it and see it as you were pointing that out. Looking at the club, and I know you mentioned you got the 5-year contract. What do you think that you would like to see the club over the next 5-10 years here in Polk County?
I think that increasingly there has to be a better differentiator than just the outcomes I told you, because there's more and more 501(c)(3)s competing for fewer and fewer dollars.
Right.
And, as I tell our donors when I meet with them, we're not all the same. I mean, we're all created equal, but all 501(c)(3)s do not perform equally. And you don't just take your seeds and spread them out along barren soil. You find a rich soil that's going to produce something. And so, what can I do to differentiate my organization so that we're doing some eye-popping stuff that is really outsized compared to the traditional clubs? And I come down to workforce readiness, because workforce readiness has real a possibility for kids who may not go on to college. You and I went to college, but not every kid. It's not just not right for every kid.
Right.
And
Correct.
okay, so you dreamed of being in the NBA and it worked, but that's a lottery ticket for most kids. And so when our kids dream of being in the NBA, I'm not saying they can't happen. I've got a guy here who proved it, that it absolutely can. But I'm saying that the odds are not great that it's going to happen. And if they're not going to the NBA or the NFL, and they're not going to college because maybe that's just not in the cards for them, what about a vocation where they can earn six figures, and where there's an increasing need for these people? What about if we were to go to the community, do a feasibility study, and say, "Hey, business leaders, what do you need that you can't fill?" And then what if I were to craft a workforce readiness center like the one we just spent $3 million on in Mulberry, and we're still building it. It'll be built by the end of this year, and we're going to craft it to fulfill the wishes of the business leaders. And if the business leaders tell us, well, we need plumbing specialists, or we need HVAC, or we need electricians, or we're going to not just bring kids in our program, through our teen program, through this facility, but we're going to certify them and get them licensed and then place them and keep track of them in these companies. To me, that the next 5 years has to be devoted to getting the teens to stay. And getting the teens to stay means workforce readiness, and getting them engaged so it's a fun place for them to come. Because as you know, the little ones, they kind of have to come because mom says they have to, or grandmom says they have to. But the teens, they vote with their feet. And if I don't make it fun, and if I don't give them a purpose and teach them a craft or a trade, I don't keep them. So that's going to be the focus for the next 5 years. How to have this workforce readiness movement really take hold in the community. And that's all throughout Polk County. We're going to start it in Mulberry. We hired a workforce readiness leader, and we're going to have a steady stream of kids, not just from our programs, but also with an alliance that we have with the Police Athletic League, who does this in the summer, but then the kids have nowhere to go after that. So we're going to take them, and workforce readiness is my next passion of having to change the hope trajectory for where these kids see their life.
Hmm. And that kind of leads to a point here that I'd like for you to mention to our audience. the business leaders, those in key positions in the community here in Polk County specifically. What would you say to those that would like to come and visit a facility, see what goes on, or would like to make a contribution, who have not heard a lot about the Boys and Girls Club?
Yes, I am a donor, as are you, and I do it because there's a return, and I've seen firsthand. And that's what I would say to them. Please reach out and come on a club tour, 'cause you'll be shocked at what you see. It will touch your heart, and it will touch your hope button. The place in you that says, "Really? There are possible good endings here?" I mean, all you have to do is know that the 2 guys who are talking to you right now came from nothing, and they're here
Right,
talking and respecting each other and admiring each other in a world that, that is not easy to make it. And if it's
right,
possible for us, it is possible for so many others if we give them a chance, and it all comes on the heels of people who care. And I I do think there is something really special about, giving to a youth organization, because there are so many things that you could give to, and you're not going it'll be a drop in the ocean, and you won't see the impact. But when you invest in our kids and you see the way that some of these mentors take control of them, I'm thinking of Jamisha, who's a basketball coach. She's also an area director for us. And Jamisha, boy, she wants these kids to get to a trade school or college, and she uses her own money to, take them on a trip somewhere. And we went to 4 or 5 colleges last summer. She took these kids and she's hounding me for scholarships for them and says, I'm pretty close. I got this one's books paid for, but I need some tuition for this thing. And you got people like that pulling these kids up. And all they need is for you to give us the funding that puts the kids in our space. And once they're in that safe space, you'll be thrilled with what your dollars do. So I don't expect anybody to give. I do want your money. I don't expect anybody to give without seeing the goods, checking under the hood. Come on one of our club tours in one of our 10 facilities now that we have this Workforce Readiness Center open. We're giving tours in that one, even though it's not open yet, and see what's possible. And we had a group yesterday, I think, go through a Rotary Club that says, "Hey, we want our name on some of these workforce readiness tools. If you have a drill press here or something, or an HVAC setup that is going to be teaching the kids, what about if our Rotary's name go on it for amount of money? We will absolutely do that." Or another donor says, "Hey, these big industrial picnic tables, can I buy one of those?" And yeah, and that's how we build clubs. We don't do it by
yeah,
ourselves.
yeah. One of the things, Steve, that I always look for is your communication out to the board members, and your email memo that always has one of the kids, a smiley face of several of them, and enjoying and really seeming so exciting. It get kind of really gets to you when you see that. That's excellent. In the Jenkins Center, one of your new remodel centers, you have a special deal inside. Want you to talk a little bit about what are the things you do for the kids, where they can not purchase, but where they can get items and so forth.
So it's our biggest one in the Jenkins Center, and it's the club store, and kids earn club bucks. And you can earn a club buck by, well, lots of ways. One day I saw kids out in the back picking up trash, and I said, "Well, how do we get you to do this, and how do we get you to do more of it?" And they held up a club buck, and just so there's these club bucks that they get the kids to help, and you can get them for getting a good grade, completing certain consecutive days of homework. And the club bucks are a way of recognizing and reinforcing positive behavior. But something surprising will happen when you actually watch the club store, and that is because there's all sorts of cool stuff. George donated some basketballs that are there, and we got some cool things that the kids really want. And they'll say, "How many club bucks is that one?" Before I get that, and so they'll save up their club bucks, and then sometimes you go there and they say, "Well, what do you want?" He goes, "Well, I'm going to buy it for my brother. He can't come to the club, but I want my brother to have this." And the generosity you see sometimes with these kids And I know George has seen this too. Steve Calagritas, a board member of ours who's very generous, would take the kids out and take them to Dick's Sporting Goods if they got good report cards. And invariably, the kids would want to use their credits to buy for a family member who didn't have. And you
Right.
just, so touched by that. But it starts out as a positive reinforcement gesture, and it works really well. And that is our best club buck store.
Right. You really see how good the heart is of these kids. We do a clothe the child event each year. My wife spearheads that, and typically, like as you just mentioned, most of these kids who come from a tough situation, they're looking to buy things for their parent or for their other siblings to make them happy, and less about spending it on themselves. So that's kind of a common thread that runs through kids at the club and so forth. So that's neat. So as we close down here, see what would you like to see your legacy be with the when you walk away from the Boys and Girls Club?
Boy, I'm not big on legacy, George.
Okay.
I'm so in the game. Listen, when I talked about the insecurities we all have, and yeah, I don't know too many humans who have accomplished more than you. And I bet you, just because I know you a little, and I'm honored to be one of your friends, that there's uncertainty in you. And I know in me there's more than uncertainty. There's always a fear of failure. There's always an imposter syndrome in my world where I think, yeah, okay, you've been a CEO now for 25 years. Or something.
Yeah.
But you're not really, but really, are you a see it? Come on, you're still that poor kid from Long Island, New York, and who grew up in Brooklyn. That's who you really are, right? And I just think that kind of fear of failure, that insecurity, that imposter syndrome, that I would say would plague me, except that it also creates a fire, and it creates a fire to make me say, I don't want to fail. I don't want to let the kids down. I don't want to let my staff down. I don't want to let the board down. I don't want to let my friends or my wife or my family down. And I don't want to let me down. So I'm so busy punching in the ring. Somebody will decide if that meant anything when it's all over. But if I stop to think about it, I'm scared of what'll happen.
Yeah. Well, Steve, I tell you, I tell people that you are one of the best, if not the best, leaders that we've had come into the area and take over a nonprofit organization and take it to a whole new level. And the energy that I see today is the energy that I saw you 6 years ago. So you haven't lost any of it, and I certainly understand your motto here. So we appreciate you. We appreciate everything that you do and continue to do in the community, and how you affect these young lives. And I know one of the things that, as I opened my business back in 1984 in the area, a lot of our employees came from the Boys Club. The Boys Club was one of the things that was a common denominator. And so I'm sure that these kids today, because that's the way it was then, that these kids today will take these learnings, these experiences on with them as they grow through the community and become very productive in our community. So I, for one, would love to thank you for all that you do. I appreciate you taking the time to be on our podcast today. Our podcast is off of my book, Catch as Catch Can, which is turning obstacles to opportunities. So everything that you've mentioned here it preaches to the opportunity that we have to not only make our situations better, our own personal situations better in our family, but also to reach back and help others to be successful. So I want to thank you for that. So that's unless you have a parting comment you'd like to say.
I do. First of all, thank you. Everything that you've said, people like you make possible. I devoured your book, and I recommend others to devour it because it is a story that there are too few real ones about. It's a story that is real and hard to read at times, but then it has a spectacular ending in that this little kid becomes somebody who I admire, and he gives back. And I'm so proud to be your friend and so pleased to be on your podcast. So thank you, and thank your listeners and all your staff.
Thank you, sir.
This has been Catch as Catch Can. Your success story is waiting to be written. What will you catch today? Go to tinsleyspeaks.com for exclusive content, resources, and opportunities. Catch as Catch Can with George Tinsley Sr. is a production of Advantage Media.